All right, we are ready for our next panel. So I remember when I went to my first conference, I think it was in January. I think I saw 2 women founder speakers in that whole conference of thousands of people. And so my goal was to change that. And so I'm really happy to see there's so many amazing women founders as well as VCs in the space now. And look at the audience. I think it's definitely getting more diverse and inclusive, so I'm really happy to hear that. So the next panel that we have is called Women VC Changemakers, and I'm going to hand it over to Radhika, right? So thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. So welcome to our Women in VC Changemakers panel. So I'm Radhika Iyengar-Emens. I'm founder of StarChain Ventures. It's a new fund that is focused on enterprise projects as well as foundational platforms and protocols. I'm a serial entrepreneur by background, now turned investor. I've advised blockchain projects, totally focused on blockchain right now, and specifically in the healthcare space. That's an area in a sector that really excites me. I'm also a very passionate advocate for women in tech and women in blockchain. So welcome to the panel. I'm going to give each of my colleagues here on the panel a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll launch into a really great discussion, hopefully.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eirini Schlosser, and I'm a director of investments at IBI Ventures. I started my career in investment banking and mergers and acquisitions, and then transitioned into entrepreneurship in artificial intelligence and technology overall before making the deep dive into blockchain. And IBI Ventures, we're particularly focused on blockchain with enterprise, probably within different aspects of that, more along the technology side of like traceability or identity, and then how that applies in different industries.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Asra. I work with venture capitalist Tim Draper, and I'm a partner at Draper University Ventures. We're obviously very big in blockchain, but aside from that, I grew up in Pakistan, went the traditional entrepreneurship route first. The company was invested in by Tim Draper. That's how I met him. And then once I moved to the US, I started running a pre-accelerator called DraperU for him, and we essentially take companies which are very early stage and help them accelerate, and our alumni have raised over 250 million. But one of our biggest successes in blockchain is definitely Quantum or Qtum, which is a $5 billion company. It's the second biggest blockchain company in China. So definitely we're very big in the blockchain space. We're doing a whole bunch of programs for corporates in the space as well, and then also investing in the space.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vivian. I'm an investor at Cota Capital. It's a $200 million venture fund here in San Francisco. We've also been looking into the blockchain space recently. We've made 2 investments, one in Basis and another project out of Berkeley, which can't be disclosed at the moment. But I've been involved in the blockchain space for quite some time. I've been personally investing for many years. I'm advising a couple of different companies as well, and excited for my fund to look at blockchain and crypto projects. Our fund is particularly focused on not just the picks and shovels of the industry, so like exchanges, custodian products, but also sort of the foundational protocols and looking at projects that help with interoperability and scalability.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's awesome. Now I get to speak, and was happy moderating earlier. So as a woman VC, again, I think the most emphasis that I want to say is there's areas of different sectors. For myself, I invested into the infrastructure layer. I invested into founders that are the protocol layer, and also at the dApp layer. So I think dApp is important because I see more of the products nowadays but it's also fundamentally very important to invest and support the technology chains that are at the infrastructure. So I have invested into companies like Libra Credit, and into companies that right now is a stealth company. I've invested in their seed stage. It's advised and backed by professors, renowned professors, in some of the amazing universities here in the Bay Area. When we can announce that, I'll do that. But fundamentally, it's been amazing. trying to add value to these founders even before they start raising. I think that's critical. And then with that, I think that you earn the respect of the founders and you can get allocation into that and then help them continuously grow. So that's been my motto and sort of my philosophy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mayra Ceja. I currently work with Indiegogo, and we're launching their new ICO platform. Prior to this, I do come from the VC world. I launched Princeton University's first seed fund directly for them, took that from 0 to 26 investments in 18 months, of which I'm proud to say about 33% of them were female founders, which I think just goes to show that if you do have a seat at the table, things do change. I have been involved in blockchain, made several investments, including Blockstack and Basis.
Thank you very much, ladies. So, you know, I think just by looking at this panel, you get a really great sense that, number one, we have some really powerhouses, women VCs that are real powerhouses in blockchain. And then what's really interesting from just listening to everybody is that there seems to be a real leaning towards enterprise. We'll be discussing about that in a few moments. I guess teeing off of the great energy off of the previous panel, Tess, I want to draw our attention a little bit towards the diversity discussion in VCs. So as we know, as far as female founders in not necessarily blockchain, but tech at large, only about 15% of female founders are getting funded, which is pretty dismal when you think about a statistic. Then what's even worse in the VC landscape, we've got 9% of VCs who are women. So there's a huge gap. There's a huge, bridge that we have to cross. And I think that if we all work together, hopefully we can dramatically change these numbers. So I want to direct that panel question to all of you, saying, what are you seeing and what are you doing personally to change that dismal number, if you will? You know, what are you doing with female founders? What are you doing with other VCs that you meet? What kinds of conversations are you having to change that?
So coming originally from more of an entrepreneurial background and also having worked in investment banking, I think one of the most shocking experiences moving into being an entrepreneur as a female was the fact that the conversations were often framed in a way that was very different from male colleagues that I saw next to me. And it really didn't matter a lot of times whether it was a female VC or a male VC. I think that the questions generally were much more subconsciously driven towards preventative. And I think that looking really deeply at what the core of the issue was is that the women were actually driving, the female entrepreneurs themselves are actually driving their responses in a way that they're much more risk averse, which in the end it turns out being more profitable and more stable of a business, but it makes the VC think, oh, they actually aren't that sure that the market is that is large or even worth the investment. And so I think helping female entrepreneurs really frame their responses and also their questions to the VCs as a positive approach to how we can grow this business and how big the market is, what are the benefits of launching this product, and why does it even make sense versus how am I going to ensure that I'm not going to lose your money? And I think reframing that conversation is extremely important and will definitely help drive women be able to effectively fundraise, whether it's a male VC or a female VC.
No, I think that's a great point, just like rephrasing things, and that's so important. So growing up in Pakistan, I'm not somebody who's not used to biases or like patriarchal structures, so I'm like very comfortable in a room full of men trying to prove a point. But I think one of the biggest hurdles that we have as women is we're so scared of taking that risk. So every time, like, even when we were like, so our fund, Tim Draper is an LP, but when we were talking to other people, they're like, oh, so how do I know that you're not going to lose this money? And I'm like, I don't, and that's why you're going to be an LP. And that's the risk that you're taking. You're going to lose a lot of this money, but then the returns would be like 100 or 2,000x. So a lot of times it's just like explaining to them that problem better that helps. And then also just building a network or support system. So as somebody who's very new, I've only been in the Valley for 3 years. I feel like in the beginning I was very lost, and everybody that I gravitated more towards was I tried to find female groups to connect with, but I didn't find any. So I think the conversation has really changed in the last year and a half, where we now have more support around that. So I think that's also really great. And then in terms of what Draper is doing, is we're doing a beauty tech program, essentially, where there's a lot of great companies in that field, and there's a lot that's happening on the section of AI and beauty and tech in general. And as some of the biggest consumers, so there's a lot that's there that doesn't get tapped. So we're looking into that. We're also reaching out to women in medtech or women. So we're doing a moms program. So for women who've been at home, we're helping them kind of taking over the more educational side of it. So how do you start a company? How do you work on that? So that's where Draper is very involved, and those are some of the things we're doing. We also have a fund entirely focused on women, and that only invests in female founders. So there's definitely a whole bunch that's going on. I think it's great, and it's going to definitely change both the returns for VCs, and that's going to drive the conversation even further. So yeah.
Yeah, those were excellent points. I think that, in venture, we're definitely seeing the conversation change a little more. It's an issue that everyone's talking about now, particularly with the Me Too movement. And so I'm seeing a lot of positive changes happen in the venture side of things. There are a ton of female-focused funds popping up, like Female Founders Fund, BBG, Halogen. So a ton of different funds, as well as we notice more of a hiring emphasis as well. And so I'm glad that the conversation is there. I'm glad that people are noticing these changes and making moves. I think that the same thing needs to happen within blockchain. So, there's been positive conversation on the venture front. I would love to see that conversation shift more to the blockchain industry as well.
So for me, I think there's three important things that I spend time on, especially for the woman movement and encouraging them into, the blockchain space or even into being a founder. One is, incubate them from the start, because they're either, not confident in moving forward, or, they don't know how to, so I incubate. Second, I've been sharing with a lot of my, amazing venture capitalists, investor friends to go out there and, speak and, be part of these great conferences. Make sure you, dial up that noise, because they're so diligent in helping on the back end. I think, men are great at marketing. They deserve what they do, but females sometimes are shy to speak up. So I've been like, please, go out there, share what you have in your mind, share the great stuff that you have. Build a little bit about your brand. And on that note, I've been very honored to help a lot of my friends actually also transition out of their funds to start their own funds and have their own initiative, their own thesis of how to invest, where they could actually decide to invest in only female founders, or female and other founders that they find are pretty amazing. So from helping even VCs capital raise, or introducing some great deals that many friends have asked to be involved with. I've been happy to do that. And third, forming alliances has been critical. Putting together events, roundtable discussions, workshops that we can bring people together to have a more small and intimate setting, to have those very safe discussions. So I think all three are important.
Great. So. For me, it's about a couple of things. The first one is definitely showing up. It's a phenomenal stage to share with all of you, but I think it's so crucial, and sort of leading off of your point, right, is that not only is it great to have a whole panel of women here and women VCs, but women should be on every panel. And when you don't see that, you should say something. I literally email like conference organizers, and I tell them, hey, your panel looks a little bit odd. Why don't you include a woman who can speak on this subject? They're experts. Here's 5 email addresses. That really doesn't give them an excuse anymore, right? So I think just send, you guys can have my email. Everybody on the panel is available to speak, right? So next time you see a panel that doesn't reflect society, just email them. So that's one thing that I encourage everybody to do. The second piece of it, and part of the reasons that I did join Indiegogo, is this idea of accessibility to both capital and investing. Both as a female, I need to be investing, and actually Bitcoin and blockchain gives you a unique opportunity to invest in smaller numbers. So that's one thing, is that I think the world is changing, but women and And everybody here needs to be more proactive about their personal investments. The second piece is in terms of accessing capital, right? So equity crowdfunding and ICOs are pretty much the same thing, right? You're funding from the crowd, and women are uniquely positioned because they are really good at building communities. So through all of these efforts, I think these are just new channels for capital as opposed to going to the same traditional route. And my last piece that I would encourage everybody here to do is you guys can all help change happen with something so simple. Teach somebody about crypto, right? A man taught me how to buy my first Bitcoin. It was a fascinating experience, but you do need to hold somebody's hand, have somebody hold your hand for the first one. And then also inviting them to conferences. Next time you see, this great access to panels, to private dinners, bring a woman, right? It changes dramatically the conversation of that dinner piece for the better. And so, yeah, those are my 3 pieces.
I'd like to add a couple of points on teeing off of the panel here, but I think, my personal opinion is that we all have a responsibility to stay active in the ecosystem. As a VC, what I want to do is build the ecosystem as well. It's something that my colleagues and I have had some degree of experience in building ecosystems, not only here in Silicon Valley, but also globally. And what's exciting when you build the ecosystem is that you can be as inclusive and as diverse as you aim to be. So just this past weekend, my colleagues and I put on an amazing hackathon. And I'm really proud to say that in our founding core team, organizing the hackathon, we had 2 gentlemen and 2 ladies, myself included in one of the 2. And we had each of those people come from a different country of origin originally. So we not only had gender diversity, we had age diversity, we had ethnic diversity, and lo and behold, when we had the final 13 projects that were able to participate in the hackathon, we had an amazingly diverse group of people. And then, lo and behold, the winner of that hackathon was an all 5 female group, some of whom are sitting here. And this was in competition with other very talented teams. It was a difficult decision to make, but it was a unanimous vote amongst the judges, who, by the way, were also a very balanced panel in terms of gender. We had 3 gentlemen and 4 women, actually, so it was fairly balanced, a little bit pro-women, I would say. But I think that when you start thinking about who's putting on events, how diverse is the core team that's putting on events, who are you including as far as participants, say, in things like hackathons or what have you, and then have a diverse set of judges, you actually do have true competition and have the ability to showcase teams to their best light, and may the best team win. And lo and behold, it was an all-woman panel that did win this hackathon. So I think this is an illustration that we can all get engaged in activities that are game-changing, that we can be the change that we want to see in the world. And I think that was the great Mahatma Gandhi who said that. So I think this is the attitude that I'd love to see trickle into VC conversations as well, that we not only invest in crypto ourselves, and I agree with my panelists here that it's time to bring another woman on board to be open to crypto, to educate them about how do you invest in crypto, to make them a little bit less risk averse if that's what they're fearful of, and to bring in the conversation and to grow that community of women in crypto as well as women in blockchain. So I guess I wanted to switch gears a little bit now. So we've had an amazing discussion on diversity and what we can do to improve diversity, especially on the investment side. What I want to focus on is investment trends. So all of us are women VCs. We are also bullish on certain aspects. I think a number of us are very pro-enterprise. My colleague and I are, as I said, starting a fund, and we're very bullish on enterprise, particularly use cases that involve things like supply chain, logistics, fintech, healthcare. There are a lot of really great use cases that we're seeing, and really the conversation around foundational protocols like trust, identity, transparency, those are things that are very fundamental. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the panel about what you're bullish on, where you're seeing the investment trends in the near and medium term, and what you're really excited about in terms of current investment opportunities.
So I think the initial focus on enterprise definitely makes sense from a strategic venture capital perspective, because most of the teams that have really been building in the early stages are very focused on the technology, and they're not it's not just diversity for male, female, in terms of the multidisciplinary approach to actually building and scaling a company. You have teams that have fantastic technologies, and they're a great fit for enterprises being able to essentially either acquire that or integrate or license those technologies into their businesses. And there's a huge need on the enterprise side. So I think the demand on the enterprise side is actually currently not met yet, by no means, from this side of the technology. And so there's a lot of growth there as an opportunity. On the other side, teams that can be multidisciplinary and actually build a business to scale and package it in a way that is digestible to the average consumer is extremely important, and that's where my focus has been, I would say, over the last few months. And I think it's always good to have a litmus test. So for example, I have a good friend of mine who's a teacher, and she teaches 10-year-old children special education. And she is the best person to test anything on. So if I can break down how does blockchain work in terms of, okay, she's also a health nut. Let's discuss how food traceability, whether it's traceability of origin or traceability of ingredients or parts, et cetera, can work on the blockchain. And she actually understands that. That's something that right now the blockchain industry has not been able to effectively achieve in terms of packaging it and communicating it to the wider masses.
Definitely. So taking on the wider masses, that's where we're at. So everything that we're doing right now in terms of investing in blockchain is kind of like that 15-year out. So how does that change it? And then most of our markets that we're looking at are emerging markets, because that's where there is no infrastructure, and that's where blockchain can really have an impact. So we recently invested in a company so we're creating a free economic zone with the government of Papua New Guinea, and it's essentially we bought an island to test a lot of these like healthcare, supply chain, all these different solutions. We're also working with various governments, like the government of Korea, to figure out the rest of these, like their systems. So a lot of our work is on that end. And then one of the things that we always say as like a person, as a team, is where's the most opportunity? It's where like cost of doing service is really high, but the quality of service is really low. So that's, again, your supply chain, your government, your education, your healthcare, all of those. And I think that's where the potential is. And for us, I think, especially, so I'm not, I shouldn't say that at a blockchain event, but I'm not as bullish on blockchain as I'm on machine learning or AI. So for me, the best match is when these two technologies kind of align with each other. So, and that's where you see all these like interesting new things happening, be that healthcare, blockchain, and machine learning. So that's like really like dramatic changes or in their supply chain and management. So that's also something that I'm personally bullish at. But in terms of the entire ecosystem, that's what we're focused on. And then most of this investment is focused outside of Silicon Valley. So we're working with outside of here. So we have funds working in Asia, Latin America, and all of those. And I think we'll see amazing things happen in the next 15 years.
So I'm personally very excited about projects. You know, everybody is looking really at layer 1 protocols, infrastructure layer. That's a very popular area for investment right now. So we're looking at that, but at the same time, keeping in mind, as investors and as fiduciaries of our LP's money, we need to be cognizant of sort of the valuations in the space and invest with price discipline. So that's something that I've been trying to push alongside my fund. So other than those types of projects, which are seeing pretty high valuations as of late, we're trying to also focus on what are the current use cases of blockchain and how can that be applied. A lot of this we found is in sort of financial applications. So we love, you know, the stablecoin plays because there's an immediate use case for it. We love, you know, decentralized exchanges like 0x. We also like derivatives like DYDX. So like things that have a current use case today, because you know, the blockchain industry is very exciting. It's still a very early industry. And again, just treating each investment and knowing that it's still very early, that there's a ton of improvements needed on the scalability front, having a long-term horizon. Those are all things to keep in mind when we're investing. So really sort of having both a long-term view, but also realizing where blockchain can be applied today.
Thank you. I definitely am very excited about what's happening on the infrastructure layer and platform. I don't, come from a technical background, but from an entrepreneur side, I love learning and understanding what the founders are, trying to do. So recently, one of the stealth seed investment, they're focusing on security, and it's globally applicable, and it's across various chains and platforms. I myself am planning to add value in different regions. I have contacts and strategic partnerships or relationship in Southeast Asia, and that's an area that has sort of leapfrog and have a lot of the newest infrastructure ready. So I see immediate partnership opportunities with enterprise companies there. So that's one of the areas that I think would be very interesting. Further, I have invested into Fintech, and this particular team, they focus on, everyone's sitting on so much cryptocurrency, so it can be used as collateral to do lending. And they have the track record and experience in, fintech side. They built great companies, have been part of great teams, yet also they have the global ecosystem that can bring on and accelerate and be able to scale very quickly. So those two areas are particularly I'm very excited about.
There are a couple of areas that I've been recently drawn to due to my current job. I think that the future of security tokens is going to be big. I'm actually talking about that tomorrow, so I won't go too much into detail today, but I think it just unlocks a tremendous amount of capital and opportunity to be able to achieve liquidity a little bit faster. So you're actually getting a lot of interest from fully established businesses that can use the blockchain to raise additional capital much faster. So that's one area that I focus on. And as a natural sort of next step, the idea of exchanges is going to play an important part to mass adoption. And those are a couple of the areas that I've been looking at. But I do agree that we're still in the very early stages of this whole game. If you're a long-term VC holder, you look at it from a very different perspective than versus able to access the markets today with a much shorter risk return profile. And those are important things that I think just everybody needs to consider for themselves or for the fund that they're running.
Any of you looking at particular sectors? I know we've talked a lot about foundational protocols, platforms, and then looking ahead, maybe longer term, into more scalable types of applications, that layer 2 and so on. But any of you bullish on healthcare, for example, or other logistics or supply chain specific cases? I know I'm pretty bullish on healthcare, particularly on the supply chain side. I'm seeing a lot of applications and use cases in pharmaceuticals, in drug development, drug discovery, as well as virtual clinical trials. So who else is bullish about healthcare or any other sector, fintech maybe as well?
So the way we've looked at it is more from a perspective of the actual technology and how it can be applied across specific sectors. So between either identity, incentivization, custodial, or security, you can essentially apply identity, whether it's identity of things or identity of people or identity of records, across either healthcare. It can be applied across so many industries, everything from car parts to your medical records or your driver's license, that I think it's really more about getting the right technology and then figuring out how that team can scale it within the industry. But I do agree, yeah, healthcare is a big one. There's so many applications that you can go, and it's really just about the team to get it there.
Yeah, so for us, it's across the board. So it's definitely healthcare is a huge part of it. So one of our, for example, so when I speak for us, it's like I'm speaking for 22 funds, so it's kind of hard. But we're very small. So so the fund that I work for, we're very small. So at our level, we're only focusing more on the teams, on the entrepreneurs. And then because 70 to 80% of them are outside of Silicon Valley, it's very interesting in terms of what problems that they're trying to solve or what problems they're working on. And most of them are, again, in education, healthcare, and government. So for us, somehow, government's been a huge vertical.
Our fund isn't doing as much on the healthcare front, but as I mentioned earlier, we're very bullish on financial applications. So, anything that onboards the consumer and institution right now. So, custodians, block trading, exchanges, wallets, any infrastructure that is going to help onboard sort of the mainstream consumer institutions, we find very interesting. Along with sort of platforms that can offer securitization. So I think that's something, one of the panelists mentioned earlier, but like companies like Harbor. So things that sort of get both people, the mainstream consumer and institutions in front of crypto we're very bullish on, as well as sort of applications, again, that can be used today in the financial space, so derivatives, stable coins, and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree with Vivian. She's a good friend, and we've both looked at various fintech deals together. I agree. I also have a thesis, which is to decentralize Wall Street. So I've looked at anything crypto related. Custodians, very big. Crypto hedge funds, block trading. Echoing what Vivian says, algo prop trading. I'm also an advisor to a stealth, crypto hedge fund platform. Amazing team. There are, venture, funded teams that had experience from, venture capital funding from Sand Hill Row. They absolutely have been very focused, knee-deep with the experience that they have to come in and do this. So excited to, also see where they go and champion them. More so is also, to the point of healthcare investing. I personally, because of a personal reason, one of my family members passed away from cancer. So even in equity area, I have invested into biotech, advised biotech companies, specifically genomic, great friends that, were founders that sold their companies to Illumina, doing great research out of Stanford. So I've been really trying to learn more in the biotech space and partner up with great people that have that expertise and see how I can help champion them. Very excited to always evangelize my Stanford doctor friends that are already fund managers who have been investing in traditional equity. I'd say we need more blockchain investors that look and invest in this area, in the health area. So he's someone that I hope will be joining us more at these conferences and panels, and raising one of his own funds as well. So he's really excited in this area. And biotech is something that I have been definitely supportive of.
So I have the unique opportunity of being able to love all of these different sectors. Definitely the ones that you guys have spoken about. One that we haven't mentioned is that I'm very excited about is the gaming space and virtual goods. That also plays to a huge crowd on our side. So I think those are another area that just wasn't mentioned, but that's exciting.
Thank you. Those are great sectors. Last question, because we're running out of time. I'd like to talk a little bit about the changing landscape. I mean, last year was all about ICOs. This year has changed significantly on U.S. shores because of the SEC and regulatory guidelines that have really put a damper on the ICO activity here in the U.S. What are you seeing in terms of shifts, in terms of deals that you're seeing come across the table? A lot of the deals that I'm seeing are more private sale focused initially. So what are you seeing in terms of trends here in the U.S.? How does that compare to the global landscape? I know you're playing a lot in emerging markets as well, so I'd love to hear your thesis on what you're seeing globally and what the differences are between what we're seeing in the U.S. as well as globally.
I think one of the biggest shifts has really just been entrepreneurs understanding, a combination of being forced by regulators to see a lot of tokens as securities and defined as certain assets that have a ownership value contained within the nature of the financial instrument. And the other side of that is that they've kind of come back to understanding that there is a value in having a long-term partner in a venture capital firm, and that they can help an entrepreneur scale, they can provide experience, network, et cetera. And it's not just about, getting an initial product off the ground with a mass amount of capital. It's really just how do you add more value with that? And that does come with having, more of an equity or private sale type structure.
Right. Yeah, so it's a very interesting differentiation between US markets and other markets, but again, we do need some sort of regulation and everything, but it also creates amazing opportunities for entrepreneurs. It's like such an early space that you'll see more and more, it's going to dramatically change the VC space itself as well. So 22X is a great example where 30 companies for 500 startups got together and they're like, you know what, we'll do a security ICO. So it's and again, it's taken them a while to get there, but in emerging markets where you don't have access to capital or where you don't have access to even mentors or people within the network who understand how to build these products, being able to get out there and raise these to raise money and at least essentially build communities that would then leverage this technology or help them build what they're building, I think that's huge, and that would really leapfrog a lot of these essential, so kind of everybody who missed that mobile or computer or internet can actually leapfrog and kind of get ahead of things. So there's a lot of potential there. And then VC is definitely going to change, and like we're already kind of seeing that. And then so the companies, when they're coming to us now, are like kind of going through that phase where they're more, so instead of just like, oh, I have a white paper and here invest in it, now it's getting to that point where you're like, all right, where's your product, what you've been able to build so far? And I think we need more of that, like regularly and personal, like being smart about where you're putting your money check. So.
Yeah, on the venture side, we've definitely seen sort of a downtick of ICOs while an uptick of private funding rounds. And it's very interesting to see this shift. You're seeing like sort of the new seed round for a lot of these projects. Oftentimes can be in the $200, $300 million valuation range. And again, that's just something to take note of. The space can be a little frothy. Some projects may come closer to meriting that valuation, some others won't. But there is a ton of money in the private, funding space now. A lot of projects, seed stage, do not have any, product, sort of raising at that $200 to $300 million valuation range. So again, a lot of this is just being cognizant of the team and what they're going to be doing with the funds, governance. I think a lot of things that Tess talked about earlier. But those are sort of the new trends that I'm seeing. The higher valuations, more money, more private rounds.
I echo what they've shared here. I personally currently am advising 2 teams, one in the IoT blockchain space and one content creator who is helping fans align themselves financially. They're all sort of stealth right now, not fundraising, but my advice to them is, yes, you can ICO, but if private funding is something that is accessible, that's probably a better way to go, given the regulatory changes. For those that potentially may want to ICO, I think it's more a matter of their product. If they're marketing to the retail consumers, an ICO, may be, something that's also very desirable for the marketing aspect and sort of for the community. But I think regulatory-wise, definitely get the proper advice because it's a structuring and also a understanding these entities and sort of, being located in the right countries and getting that right guidance. You just don't want to look back and have things bite back at you. So again, private funding has been more popular, and I have personally advised teams to go that way.
And then just really quickly, I think what everybody mentioned is spot on. Clearly, there was this notion of rational exuberance last year with ICOs. And while it appeared it was really easy to do, there was a lot of underwork that I don't think many startups really realized in terms of the marketing and meetings that everybody did to raise $50 million or basis $133 million. Like, those were a lot of meetings. I know those guys, right? Like, so there was definitely a lot of work. These ICOs don't happen overnight. What is interesting now with this market correction, I think, and the good thing, it just brings us back down to the fundamentals of like investing, which is back to the team, back to the project, and the ability, is this the right timing, right, for this technology to break through? And so I'm in full support of that. I think now with the SEC becoming a little bit clearer, the clearer they become, I think markets just, function better. As things are becoming more security tokens, I think sort of for this year, if the last year was 2017, the year of the ICO, I think for this year you're going to see a lot more security tokens, and that'll be 2018.
Great. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I'd like to leave you with some lasting thoughts. Number one, I think just from a panel perspective, we're really bullish on enterprise, on foundational technologies and protocols. So those of you working on those kinds of projects might want to approach one of us as far as future investments in your project. Number two, I think it's really clear that we've got an amazing field of women in VCs as well as on the founders side. So I think, all of you who are founding projects, please think about diversity and inclusion right from the ground floor. It really makes a difference, a lasting difference in the culture and how you shape your organization. So I think those are the 2 thoughts that I want to leave you with. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for our amazing women VC changemakers and also our women founders, speakers. As mentioned earlier, the goal is really to grow the blockchain ecosystem of men, women, and also robots, right? We want to continue the conversation and keep inviting amazing founders, VCs across all genders to these great conferences. If you're interested in speaking opportunities, let me know. My name is Lisa Ma. I help design the program here and also other conferences as well. So if you're interested in speaking opportunities, let me know. Thank you.